That ring belonged to our mother, the orphaned girls told the Millionaire. Let me know what you thought of this story by rating it from 0 to 10 in the comments, and tell me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know if you enjoyed my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The December sun beat down on the cobblestone streets of Charleston's main square as Julian Croft parked his silver BMW in front of City Hall. At 52, the real estate mogul carried the weight of 2 years of solitude on his shoulders ever since losing his wife Laura on that rainy night that still haunted him. His graying hair was impeccably styled, his Italian suit tailored to the athletic build he maintained with military discipline, but his brown eyes revealed a sadness that no amount of money could cure. Julian had come to City Hall to handle bureaucratic matters related to the new residential development his construction company was erecting in the southern part of the city. It was just another project among dozens he managed almost automatically, without the passion he once felt for his work. Since Laura's passing, his life had become a mechanical routine, waking up in the empty mansion in the historic South of Broad neighborhood, working late in his air-conditioned office, and returning home, where the silence echoed through hallways once filled with his wife's crystalline laughter. He was walking toward the City Hall building when he felt 2 small hands grab his right hand. Surprised, he looked down and met 2 pairs of large eyes fixed on his face. The smaller of the children, a girl of about 4 with curly brown hair, wearing a faded pink t-shirt, pointed with her little finger at his hand. The older one, who looked to be about 7, held her younger sister with instinctive protectiveness. "That ring belonged to our mother," the older girl whispered, her trembling voice filled with a premature maturity. Tears glistened in her dark eyes as she stared at the blue sapphire ring Julian wore on the pinky finger of his right hand. Julian felt his heart pound. The ring had belonged to Laura, but as he looked at it more closely now, a strange doubt grew in his mind. He couldn't clearly remember how the jewel had come into his possession. It was a detail that had always gone unnoticed, but in front of these 2 children, the uncertainty deeply troubled him. "How do you know about this ring?" he asked, crouching down to be at their level. His voice, usually firm in business meetings, came out softer than he intended. "Mommy always talked about the man with the blue ring," the older one replied, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "She said that one day we would find him and he would take care of us." The younger sister, who hadn't spoken yet, raised her left arm, showing a small but distinctive scar near her wrist. Julian's eyes widened. It was exactly like the scar Laura had in the same spot, a mark she got in childhood after falling off her bike. The resemblance was so precise that for a moment he felt dizzy. "What are your names?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm Victoria," said the older girl, "and this is my sister Isabel. We don't have a home." Julian observed the girls' dirty, worn-out clothes, their disheveled hair, their bare feet. Something in his chest tightened. They were homeless children, abandoned to their fate in a city where the scorching heat and lack of opportunities claimed victims daily. "How long have you been alone?" 3 months, Victoria answered, hugging her younger sister. "We ran away from the shelter because it was bad there. The women yelled a lot and there wasn't enough food." Isabel finally spoke, her voice a sweet whisper. "You're handsome, just like Mommy said." Julian felt a lump in his throat. There was something profoundly disturbing about this situation, a connection he couldn't rationally explain. The ring, the scar, the words about a man with the blue ring. It all created a puzzle that stirred something dormant in his soul. He looked around the square. A few people watched the scene with curiosity. Others hurried past, indifferent to the silent drama unfolding there. Charleston was a city where everyone knew each other, where gossip traveled faster than the wind, and where a wealthy man talking to street children would quickly become the talk of the town. "Are you hungry?" he asked. The two nodded simultaneously, and Julian saw the way Victoria discreetly held her stomach, trying to hide the hunger pangs that surely tormented them. "Come with me," he said, standing up and extending his hands to them. "Let's get some lunch and talk more." As they walked toward the nearest restaurant, Julian felt the curious stares of passers-by. He knew well the power of gossip in tight-knit cities, but something stronger than concern for his reputation drove him. Perhaps it was the loneliness he had carried for 2 years, perhaps the guilt of living such a comfortable life, while 2 children suffered on the streets, or perhaps something deeper he couldn't yet comprehend. In the restaurant, he watched the girls devour their plates of fried chicken with mac and cheese as if they hadn't eaten in days. That was probably the case. Victoria ate slowly, always checking if Isabel had enough, a maternal care that broke Julian's heart. "Where do you sleep?" he asked. "In the square or under the pharmacy's awning when it rains," Victoria replied. "Sometimes Mrs. Maria at the bakery lets us stay in her storeroom." Julian ran a hand over his face. The situation was worse than he had imagined. 2 small children alone, vulnerable to all the dangers a city offers. And there was the mystery of the ring, that inexplicable connection that left him deeply unsettled. When they finished eating, he made a decision that would change his life forever. "Listen, girls, I'm taking you to my house today. You can take a shower, sleep in a real bed, and tomorrow we'll talk about what we're going to do." Victoria looked at him with suspicion, her protective instinct sharpened by months on the streets. "You're not going to hurt us?" she asked. "Never," Julian replied, and for the first time in 2 years, he felt he was doing something truly important. "I promise you'll be safe." As they left the restaurant, Julian had no idea that this chance encounter would awaken secrets buried for years, and that the journey to uncover the truth about these girls would irreversibly change not only their lives, but his own. Julian's mansion stood imposingly in the south of Broad neighborhood, its white walls contrasting with the meticulously cared-for gardens that Laura had so loved. When the automatic gate opened and they walked up the stone path to the main entrance, Victoria and Isabel walked in silence, their eyes wide at the grandeur of the place. That would be their temporary shelter. "Oh my gosh," Victoria murmured, looking at the blue swimming pool that shimmered under the afternoon sun. "It's just like in the movies we saw on the bakery's TV." Julian felt a strange tightness in his chest as he watched the girls' reaction. 2 years ago, this house was filled with laughter and lively conversations. Now, the echo of small footsteps in the marble hallways seemed to awaken something that had fallen asleep, along with his ability to feel joy, while Isabel ran her fingers along the walls, amazed by the smooth texture. Julian led them to the guest room on the ground floor. The room had been untouched since Laura's departure, with 2 twin beds covered in immaculate white sheets and a window overlooking the back garden. "You'll stay here," he said, opening the curtains to let the natural light in. "There's a bathroom in there, and if you need anything during the night, my room is upstairs." Victoria held Isabel's hand tightly, still processing the radical change in their lives. In the past few hours, they had gone from dusty streets to a palace that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. "Why are you doing this for us?" she asked, her precocious maturity making her question the motives behind his generosity. Julian paused, unsure how to answer. He didn't fully understand what had led him to make such an impulsive decision himself. "Because you need help," he said finally, "and because there's something about you two that makes me uneasy." That night, after the girls had bathed and put on clean clothes he had hastily bought at a nearby store, Julian locked himself in his second-floor office. Before him lay the blue sapphire ring, which he had removed from his finger. For the first time in months, the jewel sparkled under the lamp's light, and the more he looked at it, the more the strange sense of familiarity bothered him. He opened the desk drawer, where he kept the few personal items of Laura's he could bear to have around. A photograph of them on their honeymoon in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a bottle of perfume that still carried her scent, and a small velvet box where she kept her other jewelry. He took the box and opened it slowly, examining each piece with renewed attention. It was then that he noticed something he had never seen before. There was an empty space in the lining, exactly the size of the sapphire ring, as if that jewel had belonged to the set, but he couldn't remember ever seeing it there. A disturbing doubt began to grow in his mind. What if the ring wasn't really Laura's? What if, somehow, it had come into his hands through another path? In the guest room, Victoria watched Isabel fall asleep in the bed next to hers. For the first time in 3 months, her sister slept between clean, soft sheets, safe from the dangers of the street. But even with this unexpected comfort, Victoria couldn't completely relax. She had learned far too early that the kindness of adults almost always came with a price. The next morning, Julian woke up early and found the girls already up, sitting on the back porch watching the cardinals hop among the magnolia trees in the yard. Isabel pointed at each bird she saw, laughing softly, while Victoria maintained her usual vigilant posture. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, serving them breakfast at the glass table on the porch. "Better than in a long time," Victoria admitted, attacking a buttered biscuit, as if she still feared this abundance might disappear at any moment. It was during breakfast that Julian decided to ask more direct questions about their past. "Do you remember your mother? What was she like?" Victoria swallowed her piece of biscuit before answering. "Mommy was beautiful. She had long hair and always smelled like sweetgrass soap. She sang to us before we went to sleep." "How did she die?" Julian asked, trying to be gentle. "She got very sick after Isabel was born," Victoria said, her voice growing quieter. "She was in the hospital for a long time, and then she went away." Isabel, who had remained silent, suddenly turned to Julian. "Did you know our mommy?" The question caught him by surprise. "Why do you think that?" "Because you have her ring. And because when I saw you in the square, it felt like I already knew you from somewhere." A shiver ran down Julian's spine. There was something in the way Isabel looked at him, a disturbing familiarity he couldn't explain. That afternoon, he decided to take the first step in unraveling the mystery. He called Theodore Finch, a private investigator who had previously done work for his company on real estate fraud cases. "Theodore, I need you to investigate 2 children for me," he said, watching the girls play in the garden through his office window. "I want to know everything about them, about their mother, about how they ended up in the shelter." "Of course, Julian, give me their full names." "There's the problem. I only know their first names. Victoria and Isabel. Their mother's name was, well, I'm not sure. They mentioned she died after the younger one was born." Theodore was silent for a moment. "This could take some time, especially if we don't have much information. But I'll start with hospital records from the last 4 years. How many children named Isabel could have been born in Charleston in that period?" While waiting for the investigation's results, Julian watched how the girls quickly adapted to the house routine. Victoria helped tidy the rooms, always careful that Isabel didn't break anything. Isabel, for her part, had developed a habit of following him around the house, watching his movements with childlike curiosity. It was during one of these observations that she asked a question that kept him up for 2 nights. "Uncle Julian," she said, using the affectionate term she had spontaneously adopted, "why do you get sad when you look at the pictures of the pretty lady?" Julian stopped reading the contracts he was reviewing in the living room. "What pretty lady?" Isabel pointed to the photograph of Laura that decorated the sideboard near the television. "That lady there. You get the same sad eyes as Mummy when she looked in the mirror." The comment hit him like a punch to the gut. There was something in Isabel's observation that went beyond childish innocence. It was as if she recognized a familiar sadness, as if she had witnessed that same melancholy before. That night, he decided to go up to the attic for the first time since Laura's passing. The space was covered in dust and filled with boxes containing memories he hadn't been able to bear keeping close. Driven by an impulse he didn't understand, he began to open the boxes one by one. It was in the third box that he found something that changed everything. Wrapped in time-yellowed tissue paper was an old photograph of Laura, but she wasn't alone. Beside her was a woman who was practically identical, only with slightly longer hair and a subtly different smile. On the back of the photograph, someone had written in delicate script, "Laura and Lauren, sisters forever, 1995. Julian let the photograph fall from his trembling hands. Laura had never mentioned having a sister. In all their years of marriage, in all their conversations about family, she had always said she was an only child. But there was the undeniable proof that she had a twin sister named Lauren. And what if Lauren was Victoria and Isabel's mother? The possibility hit him with devastating force. It would explain Isabel's physical resemblance to Laura. It would explain their knowledge of the ring. It would explain the sense of familiarity he felt when watching the girls. But it also raised even more disturbing questions. Why had Laura never spoken of her sister? What had happened between them? And how had Lauren's ring ended up in his hands? As he descended the stairs back to his room, carrying the photograph as if it were a fragile treasure, Julian had no idea that his investigation into the girl's past was about to reveal secrets that would shake his perception of everything he thought he knew about his own life. Theodore's call came on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after the investigation began. Julian was in his construction company's office when the phone rang, interrupting a meeting about the new residential project. "Julian, I found information about the girls," Theodore said, his voice carrying an unusual gravity. "I need to talk to you in person. You'd better sit down before you hear what I've discovered." The meeting was set for that afternoon in Julian's office. Theodore arrived promptly at 3 o'clock, carrying a bulky folder and a grim expression that made the businessman's heart race. Their mother's name was Lauren Santos Croft, Theodore began, opening the folder and spreading documents across the table. She died 4 years ago, shortly after Isabel's birth, from complications related to a hospital-acquired infection. Julian felt his blood run cold. "Croft? She used my family's last name?" "Not only used it, but had a legal right to it," Theodore replied, handing him a birth certificate. Lauren Santos Croft was the twin sister of Laura Santos Croft, your late wife. The document trembled in Julian's hands. There it was, the confirmation of his worst suspicions, but also the beginning of an even greater mystery. If Lauren was Laura's sister, why had his wife never mentioned her existence? "There's more," Theodore continued. "Lauren disappeared from Charleston 8 years ago, right after a scandal involving a relationship with a married man. She was pregnant with Victoria at the time." "Who was the children's father?" Theodore hesitated before answering. "Nicholas Brandt, owner of a building supply store downtown. He was married at the time, but he separated from his wife when he found out about Lauren's pregnancy." Julian knew Nicholas by sight. They had done business a few times. Over the years, a quiet, hard-working man who always seemed to carry a silent sadness in his eyes. Where was Lauren during those 8 years? In Atlanta. She worked as a housekeeper in several homes, always changing jobs. It seems she was running from something or someone. Theodore pulled another document from the folder. But here's the most disturbing part. Lauren tried to contact Laura several times over those years. I found records of calls to your home, letters sent that were never answered. Letters? Julian asked, a bad feeling growing in his chest. Yes, and according to Post, office records, they were all delivered. Someone received them, but apparently they never reached Laura. Or they did, and she chose not to reply. Julian ran his hands over his face, trying to process the avalanche of information. How did the children end up in the shelter? After Lauren's death, they stayed temporarily with a neighbor in Atlanta. But the woman couldn't keep them permanently. Nicholas was contacted, but when he came to get his daughters, he discovered that someone had legally challenged his paternity, claiming he had no rights over the children. Who did that? Theodore paused, consulting his notes. The challenge came from Charleston. It was filed by a local lawyer on behalf of a close relative of the girls who preferred to remain anonymous. A close relative? Who else besides me and Laura could claim kinship with them? That's the million-dollar question, Theodore said. And there's something else. The lawyer who represented this mysterious relative was Markham Reed. The name hit Julian like a ton of bricks. Markham was the husband of Priscilla, Laura's sister-in-law and her only known living relative. Priscilla had always been an ambitious and manipulative woman, but Julian never imagined she was capable of something so cruel. Priscilla, he muttered, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fit together in a disturbing way. Exactly. And there's more. After the legal challenge prevented Nicholas from taking his daughters, the girls were transferred to the municipal shelter in Charleston. Priscilla offered to adopt them, but then backed out, claiming she didn't have the financial means. Julian stood up from his chair and began to pace his office. The cruelty of the situation nauseated him. Priscilla had deliberately separated a father from his daughters, promised to adopt them, and then abandon them in an inadequate shelter. Why would she do that? He asked, more to himself than to Theodore. I believe the answer is related to Laura's inheritance, the investigator said. Priscilla was always your wife's sole legal heir, should something happen to you. With the discovery of orphaned nieces, that position could be challenged. The revelation was devastating. Priscilla had orchestrated this entire tragedy to protect her financial interests, without a care for the suffering of two innocent children. That night, Julian returned home carrying the weight of all these revelations. He found Victoria and Isabel playing in the garden, their laughter echoing through the property in a way that warmed his heart even amidst the emotional storm he was facing. When the girls went to sleep, he went back up to the attic, this time specifically looking for any evidence of correspondence from Lauren. In a box of old documents, he found something that confirmed his worst fears, a bundle of letters addressed to Laura, all with the return address L. Croft, and all postmarked as delivered. With trembling hands, he opened the first letter, dated 5 years ago. My dearest sister Laura, I know you are probably surprised to receive this letter after so long. I made terrible mistakes in the past, and I understand your anger, but I need you to know that I have 2 beautiful daughters, and that they are your nieces. Victoria is 2 now, and is expecting a little sister. I would love for them to know their family, to know they have an aunt who loves them even without knowing them. I'm sick, Laura. The doctors aren't optimistic about my condition. If something happens to me, I need to know my daughters will have a family who loves them. You and Julian are the only people I trust to care for them. Please forgive me for the mistakes of the past. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to open your heart to 2 innocent children who only need love. With eternal love, Lauren. Julian dropped the letter, tears blurring his vision. Laura had received these letters. She had known about her nieces. She had known Lauren was sick and needed help. But for some reason, she had chosen to ignore her sister's desperate pleas. He opened another letter, this one written just a few months before Lauren's death. "Laura, this will be my last attempt to contact you. Isabel was born a few weeks ago, but complications from the birth have left serious effects on my health. I don't have much time left. I got your address through acquaintances in Charleston. I know Julian is a good man and that you could offer the girls a life I never could. I'm sending with this letter the sapphire ring our mother left for me. It's all I have of value to give my daughters, and I would like Julian to wear it as a symbol that they have a family. If you don't want to see me, I understand. But please do not abandon Victoria and Isabel. They are not to blame for my mistakes. Lauren." Inside the envelope was a small velvet box, empty. Julian immediately understood what had happened. Laura had received the ring but had never told him about its origin or about her nieces. For some reason, he couldn't comprehend. His wife had chosen to keep that secret, leaving 2 orphaned children to be abandoned. The pain of betrayal mixed with the guilt of not having known to help Lauren when she needed it. If he had known, he would have fetched the girls immediately, would have given them the loving home Lauren so desperately wanted. But now there was an even more disturbing question. If Laura had received the letters and the ring, why had she never mentioned anything? And why had Priscilla gotten involved, preventing Nicholas from being with his daughters? As he descended the stairs back to his room, Julian knew the investigation was far from over. The answers he had found only raised more painful questions, and the certainty that he had been deceived for years weighed on his heart like a stone. Outside his window, the first rays of dawn were beginning to light up the Charleston sky, but for Julian, the shadows of the past seemed denser than ever. The confrontation with Priscilla took place on a rainy January afternoon, 6 months after Julian had found the girls in the main square. He had spent weeks planning this moment, gathering all the evidence Theodore had collected and preparing himself emotionally to hear the full truth about the secrets that had destroyed his family. Priscilla lived in a modest house in North Charleston, a far cry from the standard of living she had flaunted when Laura was alive. At 55, she had aged prematurely, her unkempt grey hair and stooped posture revealing the weight of the lies she carried. When she opened the door and saw Julian on her porch, accompanied by Nicholas Brandt, whom he had sought out days before, her face instantly turned pale. "Julian, what a surprise," she said, trying to force a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nicholas, I didn't expect to see you here." "We need to talk, Priscilla," Julian said, his voice firm but controlled. "It's about Lauren, about the letters, and about what you did to Victoria and Isabel." The fake smile vanished from her face. For a moment it seemed she would deny everything, but when Julian showed her the bundle of Lauren's letters, she knew the time for truth had come. "Come in," she said, resigned. The living room was in disarray, with boxes piled in the corners and furniture covered with sheets. Priscilla led them to the kitchen, where she served coffee in chipped cups, her hands trembling visibly. "I can explain," she began, avoiding the direct gaze of the 2 men. "Then explain," said Nicholas, his voice filled with a contained anger that had been simmering for 4 years. "Explain why you lied about my paternity. Explain why you separated me from my daughters." Priscilla took a sip of coffee before answering, clearly stalling for time. "Laura was very sick in the last months of her life," she began. "Not physically, but emotionally. The discovery that she had a twin sister devastated her. She had never known of Lauren's existence." Julian frowned. "What do you mean she never knew? They were twins." "They were separated at birth," Priscilla continued. "My mother adopted Laura, and Lauren went to another family. Laura grew up believing she was an only child. When Lauren's letters started arriving, it was a terrible shock for her. The revelation left both men silent. Julian tried to process the information that his wife had discovered she had a twin sister only in the last years of her life. "Why didn't Laura tell me?" he asked. Priscilla hesitated again. "Because she was afraid. Lauren wrote about being sick, about needing help with her daughters. Laura knew you would take Lauren's side, that you would bring the girls home, and she didn't want to share you." "Share me!" Julian exploded. "They were her nieces. Orphaned children who needed help." "You don't understand," Priscilla said, tears starting to stream down her face. "Laura had been desperately trying to get pregnant for years. Every failed procedure, every negative test left her more broken. The idea that you could fall in love with her sister's daughters, that they could take the place of the children she couldn't give you, it terrified her." Nicholas slammed his fist on the table. "And you went along with that? You helped her condemn my daughters to abandonment because of her sickening jealousy?" "It wasn't like that," Priscilla protested. "Initially, Laura wanted to answer the letters. She wanted to help. But when she found out Nicholas was married, that he had cheated on his wife to be with Lauren, she was furious. She said Lauren was a homewrecker, just like the biological father they never knew." The bitterness in Priscilla's voice revealed years of accumulated resentment. "And when Lauren died?" Julian asked. Laura panicked. "She knew you would find out about the letters, about the ring. She begged me to stop the girls from ever reaching you. She told me that if you knew the truth, your marriage would be destroyed by guilt." Priscilla stood up and walked to the window, watching the rain fall on the yard. "So I used my legal contacts to challenge Nicholas's paternity. It was easy to plant doubts about the legitimacy of the documents. And when I offered to adopt the girls, it was only to ensure they remained under my control until I decided what to do." "But you gave up the adoption," Nicholas said, his voice low and dangerous. "Because Laura died in the accident," Priscilla replied, turning to face them. "Without her, I no longer had the motivation to keep up the charade. The girls were a constant reminder of all the pain that situation had caused. A fury grew in Julian's chest that threatened to consume him." "So you just abandoned them? You let 2 orphaned children suffer in an inadequate shelter because they were inconvenient for you?" "I didn't know what to do," Priscilla shouted. "I thought someone more suitable would come along to adopt them. I never imagined they would end up on the street." "Liar," said a voice from the kitchen doorway. The 3 of them turned to see Theodore standing in the threshold, carrying a folder Julian recognized. Immediately, "Theodore, how did you get in?" "The front door was open," the investigator replied, approaching the table, "and I arrived just in time to hear the edited version of the story our friend here was telling." Priscilla turned even paler. "What are you talking about?" Theodore opened the folder and spread documents on the table. "I'm talking about the medical reports I found in the private files of Dr. Henry Morgan, the doctor who oversaw Laura's fertility treatments." Julian picked up one of the documents and began to read. As he absorbed the information, he felt as if the floor was opening up beneath his feet. "Laura was pregnant," he murmured. "She was pregnant when she died." "Exactly," said Theodore. 2 months pregnant. Something you both knew very well, didn't you, Priscilla?" The woman sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. "Priscilla," Julian said, his voice dangerously low. "What else haven't you told me?" Between sobs, she began to confess the full truth. Laura found out about the pregnancy the same week Lauren's last letter arrived. She was radiant. She had finally gotten what she always wanted. But when she read in the letter about Lauren's grave health condition, about how she begged for you to take care of the girls if she died, Laura had a terrible crisis. "What kind of crisis?" Nicholas asked. "She was convinced it was a sign, that God was testing her. Either she chose to save her orphaned nieces or protect her own baby. In her mind, the two could not coexist. Theodore handed another document to Julian. This is the accident report. Priscilla, tell them about the argument you had the night Laura died. Priscilla took a deep breath before continuing. Laura called me that night, in a panic. She said she had made a decision, that she was going to answer Lauren's letter and ask you to get the girls. But she also said she was afraid that the stress of caring for two traumatized children could harm her pregnancy. And what did you tell her? Julian asked. I told her she was being ridiculous, that she was risking the only pregnancy she might ever carry to term for two children she didn't even know. I said that if she truly loved you and the baby, she would protect that family first. The confession came out in a desperate flood. She hung up on me, furious, said I was wrong, that she was going to tell you everything that very night. She left the house driving in the rain, completely emotionally out of control. The accident was my fault. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the rain against the windows. After that, Priscilla continued, when I learned that Lauren had died just days after Laura's accident, I fell into despair. I felt I had destroyed two families with my selfish advice, so I did the only thing I could think of. I kept the girls away from you so that at least you wouldn't have to live with the constant reminder of the tragedy I had helped cause. Julian stood up from the chair, pacing the kitchen as he processed all these revelations. Laura had died carrying the weight of an impossible decision, and Priscilla had spent years feeding a guilt that had led her to make increasingly worse choices. Where's Markham? Nicholas asked, referring to Priscilla's husband. He left me 6 months ago, she replied. When he found out everything I had done, he couldn't look at me anymore. It was Theodore who broke the heavy silence that followed. There's one last thing I need to show you, he said, pulling an envelope from the folder. Priscilla, you said Laura never answered Lauren's letters, but that's not true, is it? Priscilla looked up, surprised. On the night of the accident, Laura had written a reply. The letter was in the car with her. I managed to get a copy from the police archives. Theodore handed the letter to Julian, who opened it with trembling hands. Dearest Lauren, please forgive me for the delay in responding. Discovering I have a twin. Sister has changed my life in ways you can't imagine. I'm pregnant, sister. After years of trying, I've finally managed to give Julian the child he so deserves, but that doesn't mean I will abandon your daughters. Tomorrow, I will tell my husband everything, and I know he will be on our side. Victoria and Isabel will have the loving home you want for them, and my baby will have the most wonderful cousins in the world. Come home, Lauren. Come meet your family. With love, your sister Laura. Julian let the letter fall, tears streaming freely down his face. Laura had made the right choice. She had chosen love over fear, family over selfishness. If it hadn't been for the accident, everything could have been different. 3 months later, on a sunny April morning, Julian was in the garden of his mansion watching Victoria and Isabel play in the pool. Beside him, Nicholas helped Isabel float in the water, while Victoria showed off her new swimming strokes. The property had been renovated to accommodate the new family dynamic. Nicholas had built a smaller house at the back of the property, where he lived and could watch his daughters grow up daily. The four of them had created a harmonious routine, where the girls had both the financial stability Julian could offer and the paternal love of Nicholas. On the porch coffee table, the blue sapphire ring was now divided into 2 small chains, one for each girl, a symbol of the mother they had lost and the family they had found. Priscilla had voluntarily checked into a mental health clinic where she was receiving treatment for the depression and anxiety disorder that had led her to make such destructive decisions. Julian visited her monthly, not for forgiveness, but because he understood that guilt had transformed his sister-in-law into a person even she didn't recognize. Daddy Julian, Isabel said, getting out of the pool and running towards him. "Look what I drew for you!" It was a drawing of 4 people holding hands in front of a big house with a bright yellow sun shining in a blue sky. At the top of the page, in her childish handwriting, she had written, "My family." "It's beautiful, Princess," he said, hugging the wet girl without caring about his clothes. "Aunt Laura was watching us from heaven when she found us, wasn't she?" asked Victoria, approaching her adoptive father. "She definitely was," Julian replied. "She and your mom, Lauren, are very happy watching you grow up here." As the sun set over Charleston, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Julian understood that true love was not just about blood, but about the bonds we choose to create. The scars of the past had transformed into bridges to a future where 4 wounded hearts found healing in a union they never imagined possible. And in his shirt pocket, he always carried a small photograph, Laura and Lauren as children, smiling at the camera, sisters whom life had separated, but whom destiny had reunited through the love they left as their legacy. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Let me know what you thought of my story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.